Welcome to Literary Deep Dives and Discussions with me, Aleksey, the author of the Unseen Operative series, and this is Alexsey Fraser. She is an author joining me today who writes fantasy on dinosaurs. Welcome, Aleksey.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So to all my viewers, you may have seen Aleksey before on my Who Wrote It series. That was just a blast. And of course, right after that podcast, I had to get her on for an individual interview. So here she is. Have now read the book.
Yay!
Yeah, she sold me on the book. You sold me on that book during the podcast. So if others weren't sold, they're going to be sold in this interview, hopefully, because this is a good book. It's a very good book. But just to get started, let's get to know you a little bit more. Tell us about yourself and how you became an author.
So my name is Alexsey Fraser. I've always loved dinosaurs ever since I was little. And some of my first dinosaur memories was watching Walking with Dinosaurs and Disney's Dinosaur, the one with the iguanodons. And that's actually how I first known about what Carnotaurus was Disney's Dinosaur. That's like my favorite. Those are like my favorite characters, even as like a little 4-year-old me. I've always, and as I got older, dinosaurs have just really just been such a huge part of my life. I cannot see myself without dinosaurs in my life. So I have dinosaur blankets. I am wearing this little cute little dinosaur shirt.
Nice.
Yes. Momosaurus. A couple years ago, I became a Momosaurus. I just can't see myself without dinosaurs, and they just became such a huge part of my personality. Even like my friends, family, coworkers, like they see a dinosaur, oh, that's Alexsey right there. I love the science of them, and also like making up stories. I've been kind of had a wild imagination ever since I was young. It wasn't until about middle school or so that I started actually writing these stories down. In fact, Glowing Red started as a short story I wrote when I was about 14. I was homeschooled at the time, and there was an assignment. It was like, you have to write a short story. And I'd been cooking these characters in my head for a long time. And I was like, you know what? Let's just write this down. Of course, back then I was 13, and I was kind of a little bit of a lonely teenager at the time. Of course, being homeschooled. Yeah, I wrote this really cheesy love story between Carno and Dinosaur and turned it in. The instructor really liked it. But then like years later, it's like COVID hit. I was working as an ICU nurse during COVID, and that was a time.
I imagine. Jeez.
Yeah. Writing Glowing Red was like an escape. And I had thought about that original short story. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore, but I was just like, you know what? How about I just rewrite the darn thing? And then I was just getting more ideas, and thinking about how I could just make it better from that short story. The short story had some parts that were like really cheesy. And you improve as a person, and you mature, and you just grow so much. Basically 10 years. So I really wasn't the same person I was. And I was like, you know what? And I started writing it down. I handwrite everything. Like, in fact, sometimes it looks like a Hot Mess Express.
I'm so impressed.
I wrap it around my brain. This might just be a little old school, even though I'm 30. I have to write it. I just have to handwrite it down, and then I type it. That's just how I do it. And once I was just like handwriting it, and then I was very nervous about getting it out to the world. I was like, it was such a unique idea and such a unique concept. I was just like, what if nobody likes it? So I let my husband read it first, and he was just like, I love this.
It is. It's absolutely unique.
I am so glad. And when I started typing it out and just kind of just fleshing it, and I never took any creative writing classes. Like I never creative writing in my my day job, which is nursing, are two completely different avenues. So all of my training was in nursing. So I was very familiar with academic paperwork, APA. And in fact, if you look at my newsletters, on the Dinosaur of the Month, I cite my sources in APA format.
I just noticed that.
Yes. It was just like, that was drilled into my head, all the way up to my master's degree. It's like, you've got to cite your sources, cite them in APA. And I was just so I was very familiar with that. But then writing a full novel, it was a lot of trial and error. So that's why it took me 5 years. And in fact, I almost completely rewrote Glowing Red. So the first couple of drafts, I wasn't satisfied with the pacing. The pacing was kind of like you're doing an accordion. It was like slow down and speed up, and slow down and speed up. I was like, that's not what I want. And I ended up getting an idea of writing in dual POV, so you can get perspective from both characters. And I think that really, really enriched the book and made it better. So I'm really satisfied with that.
I mean, you've touched on so many incredible things there. I mean, first off, like getting a book when you're 13 and then touching it up again years later, remembering that and making it something better, that is incredible. But there's also these little things that, readers don't know goes on in the author's life is how many times we revise the book. Well, we look at that, like pacing. Pacing is such a big thing for authors, and we can get proofreaders, editors, beta readers looking at them, or we'll look at our manuscript ourselves and be like, this is off. And it takes so much time to go through those things, and the readers are just like, this is a book.
Yes, that
Yeah.
And apparently that's one of the things I've learned as an author was that's part of it. The whole rewriting the entire book is part of it. Like there are some authors out there that had to, it's like they were not satisfied with the first draft of the manuscript. I'm like, I'm going to go in this way, and that's basically what I had to do to finally be satisfied with Glowing Red.
And it can be very painful sometimes to have to do that because, I mean, even though we know that this needs to change, it's not it. It's like, oh, I put in all this work and I didn't get it, and you have to do it again. And, I mean, at the end of it, you're satisfied, you're happy that you went through the pains, but it is a difficult process.
Yes, but it's worth it. It's just like it makes it better to have that pain now than to have that pain when like you get in like 1-star, 2-star reviews. Then you're like, this is really off. It needs needs this, needs that, and all that. And it's like I don't want that kind of pain. I'm proud of the work that I did, and I don't regret it at all. Having to rewrite it, or even like the first drafts. The fruit of all this labor. An average rating on Amazon Goodreads is 4.8. Come on.
Yeah, that's very impressive. I know a lot of new aspiring authors, they think that, we want these perfect 5-star reviews, and you've rushed to get the book out, and then it's like you're saying, you don't want to rush it because then you're going to sabotage yourself in the long run. But it's also unrealistic to have 5-star reviews. Having anything from a 4.5 to a 4.8 rating, like that is the golden standard for author success. And you have that because you put in the pains and you took the time to create a quality book. And so it is absolutely worth it. Well, let's dive into Glowing Red. There is a lot of fun stuff to talk about in this book, especially because of the dinosaur aspects. But there's a lot of incredible themes that we want to discuss on this podcast today for all the viewers. So if you're not converted to reading this by the end of this episode, that's on me. But first, let's kind of do a little brief overview of Glowing Red. Glowing Red follows this. I'm going to try to say the dinosaur name. Carnotaurus?
Yes.
Is that it? Yes. Okay, I got it. Woo! Okay. Yeah, his name is Carno, which makes it easy to remember what kind of dinosaur he is. But he grows up in this domestic life because dinosaurs have been brought back. Scientists have worked very hard to recreate them, and now it's kind of like a Dinotopia remix where people are living with dinosaurs. But it's not all gung-ho. There's difficulties and there's differences and tensions there, but something happens and he ends up in the wilderness needing to survive. And that is when he ends up meeting this mutant mammal that has escaped one of the government labs. Very, very interesting, very, very intense. But Carno as a character, I found him very compelling. He starts out as a wimp, just to stay it flat out. He's a wimp.
That was from the original short story.
Okay, good. I was going to ask about that. Like, was he always this way? But it's fun to have a character who needs some serious growth, and he does do that. So tell us a little bit about Carno and then this mutant mammal that he ends up meeting.
So Carno is a character kind of based a little bit on me, kind of a shy, quiet, like my books kind of person, and I also suffer from anxiety. So those pieces are what make Carno and someone I can relate to. But I also had this envision as like have him have this growth. Even though he has this anxiety, he's still functional. He still has a job. He's still at the very beginning. He was at school and he can drive and do errands and all that. He's not so anxious that he just can't function. That's kind of like how I am. Like I still have my anxiety, but I can still function as a person. But I think everybody they go through stuff, they grow just like Carno did. That name also came from the original short story as well, but I spelt it a little differently. It's Dinosaur, it's Dinosaur. I ended up changing that, kind of like a nice little play on words. She's lived in the wilderness all her life, and she's in a way a little hardened from that kind of lifestyle. She's used to hunting and running away and making sure the Cornelia government lab doesn't get her. But then as the book goes on, I see that she softens up, lets herself be vulnerable because she's safe. I wanted the two characters to be like an opposites attract thing. So like Carter's appearance, he's got these scales and these bumps along his back, just like the actual Carnotaurus did back in the Cretaceous period. And those horns on his head, that little bit of that scientific accuracy, but garnet eyes. Whereas Dinosaur, she's covered in fur, which is the opposite of scales. Covered in fur, she's a mammal rather than a reptile. And she has green eyes. Green is the opposite of red. So just like even in their eyes, there's that opposite, and their personalities and their backgrounds are opposite. That's why I really like how they mesh together as characters and how they accept each other's influences and ways of thinking and all that good stuff. And that's what I was really wanting to go with those characters. And Dinosaur has, we are very complex as complex human beings, and we have very layers and branches of our personalities. Whereas, that side of me that's Carno, that's, I want to read my book, I'm anxious about the world, like that. Yeah. Whereas, the other side part of me is like, Dinosaur is like, Dinosaur's very confident, like she's very able and confident, and she can do all these things. And sometimes when I'm in nursing, I feel that way some days, especially when I'm talking about certain topics in my field that I'm very knowledgeable at. Then that's where I feel about Dinosaur. There's also that, fear of vulnerability sometimes that I have.
Very relatable. You're right. Everybody is made up of all these layers, and I definitely noticed that in the book. It's curious, the two of them coming together, like it really calls in mind the different adaptations that we kind of have in life, especially when it comes to relationships. Relationships are never built onto equal or identical people, and if they are, they're usually pretty boring, but intimate relationships and gender studies were a huge part of my majors, geeking out over this. But it's interesting to see those different dynamics, how they interact with each other, how they adapt to each other, and how she's strong in areas that he's not. He's strong in areas that she's not, and they complement each other. And that's really what makes relationships work, is finding and working with your differences in this collaborative effort to make something new, something brand new. And everybody has to adapt. It's kind of like leaning on that topic of adaptation, because not only did they have to adapt to each other, they had to adapt to a new lifestyle. I mean, for him, he was domestic, and now he's living in her world, and he's bringing domestic ideas to her, like cooking food, whereas she's bringing to him, like, this is how you survive. So just kind of on that idea, what were you trying to show with adaptation, blending two different people together as well as two different lives?
So I think it's like what I wanted to do is have have them accept each other and pull ideas from each other. Like Dinosaur accepts Carter's cooking when he cooks her a really good meal, even though she's used to eating it raw. But then it's like he cooks it for her, and he's like, and the Dinosaur's like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. And cooking for Carno was, even though we were talking about non-traditional gender roles, in this context, I wanted it to make sense, because in the beginning of the book, Carno loved to cook. It was a hobby for him. Like he made his own bread, he cooked all the meals, and he learned it from his mom, who also liked to cook. So to him, it was a nice creative outlet for him. And that just transitioned to, his life with Dinosaur. And Dinosaur was like, it's like a whole new world just opened up to her. And then Dinosaur, you have to have food to survive. And when Carter runs out of ramen, he's left with no other choice but to eat, wild game. You don't have, it's either you eat it or you starve. So that just makes sense. And Dinosaur's used to hunting. They just had this agreement of like, okay, she hunts, he cooks. But then later in the book, they had to switch.
Yeah, and I thought that was fascinating, because that's what happens when you're living in the wilderness, is nothing's always stagnant like it is in controlled environments like domestic living. I never lived a survival type life, but I have adapted to another culture when I lived overseas in the Philippines, and things are so different there. It is often like outdoor living, that to an extent I kind of related to that like you can bring so much of you in and make it for a while, but then there's always going to be some sort of turning point where you can no longer do what you were doing. It doesn't flow the same across the board. Like, I mean, in your book, you had seasons, winter, there was injuries, and because of all these things, they had to learn, like, okay, this situation is going to cause us to switch, to change. And it's very relatable, not only to adapting to other cultures, but in relationships in general. Like, if you have kids and a kid gets sick, okay, who's going to take care of the kid? Who's going to do this? Like, our
Yeah.
roles within relationships are switching all of the time. And
Yes.
so traditional gender roles in and of themselves, like those are fantastic to have like an idea of this is what I generally do and what this is what I generally don't do. But
Right.
ultimately, no human can ever keep to these roles and live a stable relationship because life is always throwing things at us like crazy. And there's actually even studies have shown that relationships that have a fluidity between gender roles are generally the longest lasting and the
Yeah.
happiest. So I found that fascinating in your book.
Yeah. I'm so glad.
Adapting to wilderness survival generally as a topic, because the way that you write this, it sounds like you're very acutely familiar with it. So I'm like, is Aleksey a really outdoorsy person? Does she have experience with that? Like, tell me about what inspired all that.
Well, nature documentaries, especially like the dinosaur documentaries I would watch. And sometimes I like to hike when I go on vacation, like especially when I go to the mountains. Hiking is really fun. And I also read the book called The Wild. That's inspired a lot of the wintry stuff in there because like the dog had to survive Alaska. So I was like, ooh, gotta write this down, gotta write this down, gotta write this down, gotta write this down. Of course, I would watch on movies, TV. Sometimes I'm kind of outdoorsy if the weather's good. If it's too hot, nope. If there's mosquitoes out, nope. I'm good.
Yeah, inspiration comes from all sorts of places. It's interesting to me that you mentioned documentaries and movies. Like for me, I get so much more inspiration from watching things than reading things, and it's difficult because when I come across other authors, they're like, or even on Instagram, what book inspired your book? And I'm like, I watch things, I learn things, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah, it's like several books actually helped me compile Going Red. Like I took pieces of like different books like Jurassic Park, The Shape of Water, Dinotopia, Call of the Wild, all of those books. I was like taking these certain elements and just kind of helped Glowing Red.
That's how the author mind kind of works, is we take this montage of things around us, our life experiences and the things that we have had opportunities to read and watch, and it kind of conglomerates in our brains and produces a book. It's magic like that, and it's hard to be like there's a singular thing. I mean, even now, I still keep having these little dawning revelations of, oh yeah, this also inspired parts of my book, and I didn't realize it. Like the other day, I was doing another query letter, and it struck me that the Mortal Instruments are the same vibes as my book, and I was like, whoa, I forgot I even read that series, but I did. Yeah. So yeah, it's things will always pop up, and so yeah, it's difficult to say that this is the inspiration, but we do the best we can. Back to the relationship of Dino and Carno. I think it's fascinating that they both come in with different, well, for him, he's got a lot of fear. And then for her, she's got a lot of trauma. And so they both come from these different spectrums of trials that they have to overcome. For Carno's part, specifically the fear, what was fascinating to me was that he was afraid of this mutant mammal that they heard had escaped the lab, which turns out having a connection to Dino. But after he meets her, that fear is not initially gone. It takes some time for that to disappear. So I was wondering if that was intentional.
Yes. In the original short story, the one of the cheesy parts was like the insta love. 13-year-old me was like, ooh, yay. But 23-year-old me was like, this because in real life, y'all have to grow into each other. That was one of the changes that I made, was that they meet and it's like, oh goodness, over time they become comfortable with each other, and that forms the romantic bond that they have.
It's very much like that, but to me, it's also kind of a realistic message of nobody can fix you, nobody can heal you. There's this narrative that I see a lot. I've seen it in my past professions, and I see it a lot with the mental health community, that there's this attitude of you need somebody who's going to be stable in your life, and that is going to be your healing path. And that puts so much pressure on the partner, but it's also unrealistic because while we do need to seek healthy-minded individuals to help us, ultimately the healing doesn't come from somebody else. It has to be tackled from within. And fear is a huge part of that. To overcome your fears, yes, exposure helps, but ultimately you have to decide that it's okay within you. And like I've done a lot with exposure therapy back in my days of having an eating disorder, and
Yes.
That was always a mind game, but it always did come down to that. Is it's you and yourself. You eventually decide, you determine, and when you decide that it's no longer scary and you work your way to overcome and to challenge it, that's when the healing happens.
Part of his dream sequence, like, he has this recurring nightmare, but then in the middle of the book, he allows that nightmare to just progress, like allow himself to like go through it. Dinosaur says the dream keeps coming back because you keep waking up before it gets a chance to finish. So, Carla actually finally gets rid of that recurring nightmare just by letting it finish. And he's ending up fighting against like a shadowy figure. And I had meant to have like a dark, like this dark version of himself. Like he's fighting himself.
Let's look at Dino, her traumas. She's also very fascinating. I mean, I love what you did with Carno there, him overcoming that in his dream, because that to me is very much like a real CBT method that people use is, what story are you telling yourself subconsciously? Where does it end? Because we're always so worried that we won't let it finish out. So for me reading through that, I was like, that is just beautiful, because that is the end of it. When you understand the end of your fears, they're not only not so scary, but you grow in confidence. So it was very well done. Dino with her trauma, wow, she was complex. She's not only had like the trauma of being a child and your parents are suddenly taken from you, but she's had traumatic relationships in multiple fronts. She's had parental betrayal, she's had romantic betrayal, and betrayal trauma is one of the most difficult traumas to overcome. So tell me a little bit about that.
Dinosaur's trauma really kind of shaped her, and like she has her own fears that she had to overcome. With the villain of the story, Calder, she had made a deal with him, but ended up he was taking advantage of her. He was using her to hunt. Like she would do all this hunting, like to the point like of exhaustion. She in starvation because he was taking all of the meals. So that was very traumatic for her. And of course, he was very unkind to her. So that was very traumatic for her. Being orphan was also very traumatic for her. Like her parents were taken away from her at a very young age. And of course, she's also living in that fear of the Cornelia government lab coming to take her away. But then there's another romantic, her first spouse, she was married once before, the raptor named Valdemar. She doesn't really talk much about him. I expand him on the next book, but in the next book, Caged Fire, he's not a bad character. The trauma that Dinosaur had with Valdemar is more guilt trauma, survived guilt. I'm not going to give that away because Valdemar was actually a really fun character, right? He's like this dinosaur serial killer, kind of like Beauty and the Beast kind of thing. I started writing like a few passages about him. I might write a book about him. I'm not sure yet, but there is a big chapter of Dinosaur and Valdemar. Like they have closure. She never got that closure. Of course, in the first book, she has that guilt, and that's why she doesn't really want to talk to him. That may be a little bit of a spoiler. So spoiler.
Yeah, that is interesting. I'm looking forward to the second book. I feel like I relate to her so much in so many different ways. Yeah, but she's struggling between this idea of, the person I'm with, whether it's a father figure or a romantic partner, there's control or there's protection, which is which and what's real. And there's a little bit of a mind game that goes on with that. And that's what trauma really is it's this constant mind game of what is real, what is not, who's being honest, who's not, and when. And that's not just with trauma. We always have to differentiate between these things in life for regular functioning people. But for her, it really is like well played out throughout your book that she's struggling with these internal feelings. And poor Carno he's just absolutely sweet and very patient with her, but he does have his little frustrations here and there, but he's just very good in his approach with how to handle that. So I'm curious, what inspired his reaction and his management of her trauma?
My husband, he done so wonderful about helping me go through my anxiety and process it and learn that it's not as bad as it seems. Of course, anybody can get frustrated worrying about something that's somebody else trivial, but to me is like I'm spiraling on just a little bit. And, he's, been very patient with me and rarely gets frustrated with me about that. And he's just wonderful. And that inspired Carno being very patient with Dinosaur, but also have that realism of like, hey, Dinosaur, you gotta open up to me. And sometimes, some couples do this, like one will shut down while the other one is like trying to communicate. And that was a barrier that a lot of couples have to overcome. You just have to have that extra patience. And my husband is just like, he's just so wonderful with that. And that's what inspired that.
That's awesome. See, this is what books should be, is teaching healthy relationships. And that's very much
Yes.
it is grounded and realistic that, these
Mhm.
are two imperfect
And I've no
individuals and yet they're able
and
to help.
yeah, and I've noticed that a lot of YA books or even like romance books for adults,
Mhm.
both alike, romanticize toxic relationships. I was like, that's not good for young people. Someone who's like 13, 14, 15, who's just getting started on what they want in a relationship. They don't know the difference between like, oh, this is healthy, this is not. Whereas someone like you and me, we're in happy marriages. We can look at a toxic relationship in a book and be like, oh, haha, that's silly. That'll never work. Or he flips over like, I know what's coming. I know what's coming. But a 15-year-old person doesn't know that yet. You're still growing. So I
Yeah.
want what is right. And no relationship's going to be perfect. Carmen and Dinosaur, they do have their flaws. So they also don't bring each other down.
Exactly.
And that's what I wanted to portray, especially, and that's why, like I say, it's YA. Like young readers can read it. And also, adults, like older adults, can read it as well.
It is definitely a book that I would be okay with my teen reading because of that. You're so realistic in the way that this relationship goes time-wise, especially. They're not like you said, it's not instant love, but it's also not instant love and then, intercourse. Like so many things are anymore in intimate relationship studies. There's a huge focus on different kinds of loves. Someone romantic love being the one that is the most portrayed. And it is this passionate, like, we're in on things and things heat up and they go. And that is what society sees the most of in marketing and in books and media. And that's actually the most short-lived form of love that has ever been studied. And it's been found that it's very minimally necessary to have a happy, long-lasting relationship. And yet there's so much emphasis put on this teeny tiny little thing, whereas the relationship that you're showing is something more of the form of companionate love. We're friends, we're pals, we trust each other, and then it blossoms. And yes, there are those little instances of, he gives me butterflies, and it's wonderful. And that is the long-lasting love that keeps going. It's got its ups and downs, yes, but it's real. And that's the kind of healthy love that I love seeing in your book.
When I go to church, I would hear the priest say, love is not just a feeling, it's a choice. It's sacrifice. Both Carmen and Dinosaur make sacrifices for each other.
Exactly. I love that. It's not an emotion. How much of meaning gets attached to our emotions when it's, emotions are so volatile. You can be happy one day at something, you can be mad at it the next day. I mean, as women with hormones, like once a month, things go down and it doesn't matter what you did, it's not okay. So we base our realities off of emotions, and to find a thing as that emotion, we're always going to fall short and be very, very disappointed, if not traumatized.
Yeah. And women's brains are very different from men's brains. Men's brains are very like logical, do this, that. Have you ever seen this YouTube video of like boxes and wires? Oh, love that. Love that.
Great analogy for it.
It's like, it's so real. It's like our brains as women is like connected to this, connected to that emotion's connected to this, that emotion's connected to that. And it's like, that's just how we think.
It is. I've also, one I heard recently was the war theory, where women have 15 mils spinning in the back of their mind, men have one, and it's going at this pace.
Yes.
It's like that is it, is we do 15 at once. And when we're talking to you, when we just woke up and we had a dream, like we've got 15 going on here. So we're probably going to accuse you of things that you didn't do. And you're just like, what?
Men and women complement each other.
They do. It's the beauty of it, is it's supposed to be that way. It's divinely designed. And if we learn to embrace it and enjoy it, like life is a wonderful thing. It's not easy, but it's wonderful.
What were some of your favorite passages? I'm curious. What were some of your favorite parts and passages?
Let me see all my sticky notes here. I really liked the moment when he's like struggling with his teeny tiny arms to lift this tree.
Oh, the log rolling scene.
Yes. I felt his frustration, and it's because like I have my own physical limitations, and so he's throughout the book he has these limitations with his teeny tiny arms. But in that scene, like I just happened to be having one of those days where my chronic issues were just kicking my butt, and I was like, I hate this. Like, I feel you. Like, we can't lift these things. We're not strong. We're not big. Your arms, you can't reach. And several times he has that. He can't reach. He can't pick up, this. He can't hold that. And just like, life sucks. Life sucks for us, man. And then he's like, I'm going to push through it. And he did. And so, that was just like, it was such a good reminder of this moment sucks, but I can push through it. So, like that is one of my favorites for sure. But also I have had like the little laugh when he was trying to like reach the pot and his hand's like so long. Like there's humorous moments in this that I think I'll endlessly enjoy it. Definitely going to be a book that I read again and again.
Yay.
How about yourself? Do you have like, is there a scene that you're like, this is just my favorite when I think about it?
I'm really proud of the end where there's like the epic fight on ice.
That is a pretty epic fight
section. That is one of my favorites. Because it's like a dinosaur fight on ice. Like, how awesome is that? And I also got to explore some speculative paleontology because, like, Carnotaurus, they have these teeny tiny arms and they have these horns on their head. What were the function of those horns? Well, it is thought by many scientists that they use those horns to interlock with each other, like hear their heads interlock with each other, and then like do like these little shoving matches. So like in Glowing Red, I call them locking horns. The scene where Carno and Cecil lock horns, but then Carno loses. But then I wanted to come back to that where Carno and Calder lock horns. And it's like, it was fun doing that little bit of speculative paleontology of how Carnotaurus could have fought with another Carnotaurus.
I love that, especially like that, having it in the front and then having it again. Like, that is cool. That's artful. I think as an author, very artful to bring it back. Speaking of paleontology, because you are super into dinosaurs, like, tell me about like all the research and all the ideas that went into this. Because yes, there's dinosaurs, but you cover different types of dinosaurs, and it's evident that you know what you're talking about when you are playing not only their survival but their interactions.
Yes, I've basically been a dino nerd ever since I was like a kid. So I've watched all sorts of documentaries. I've read books. I've watched YouTube channels. Like, some of my favorite YouTube channels that are very informative are Extinct Zoo and Raptor Rex. They're both on YouTube, and they go through this. Here's a dinosaur, and they talk a lot about the research and all that really interesting facts. Sounds like, ooh, like that though. And I've been doing that for years and years and years. And of course, there's always new stuff coming out in paleontology. So there's always new research. And that has also inspired me to like do some like really creative stuff too. One of the reasons I chose Carnotaurus to be represented in this book was Carnotaurus is one of the few dinosaurs named after a mammal. The name means meat-eating bull, and bull is a mammal. So that as him like Carnotaurus and vicious meat mammals, like, oh, I should put that down, write that down. And you don't have to be a dinosaur expert to read my books, because I do have an appendix of like, here are the different dinosaurs that are being represented, and some of them are not really all that known because somebody else might. Although Tyrannosaurus Rex is like an awesome, cool dinosaur, and is one of the most studied dinosaurs in paleontology, it might not be somebody else's favorite dinosaur. Maybe your favorite dinosaur is Deinonychus, which is that really big duck-billed dinosaur with really long arms. We're in that scene where Carno has that conversation with Deirdre in dinosaur sign language. And I got to thinking, like, dinosaurs with these long bills and beaks, and I'm like, they may not be able to move their lips like you and I would to speak spoken language. So that's how dinosaur sign language came to play. So there's a little bit of that sign language. It's so much fun while I'm reading something or watching something or experiencing something. Or just like, oh, I'm going to take that piece and I'm just going to create something. One of my favorites is Carno's car, his make and model. So it's a 2010 Mezzo Sistre. So the 2010 part came, it was the year I wrote the short story. Mezzo came from like the Mesozoic era. And then Sistre is the species name of Carnotaurus. So Carnotaurus is the genera, and then Sistre is the species name. So Carnotaurus Sistre. And that book, in the book, I put like all these adaptations that would actually help a short-armed dinosaur like Carno, just to make it make sense. And those are so much fun to write. And also paying homage to different paleontologists. For example, Libby Anning, Carno's boss. I got her last name from the first female paleontologist, Mary Anning. She was a paleontologist that's discovered ichthyosaurs and studied them. And Libby's office is littered with all these ichthyosaur figurines. Yeah, to talk about that in one of the sentences in the beginning of the book. So that was really, stuff like that. It's just so much fun to write.
Love that. Like, there's so many Easter eggs sprinkled in there, and it's incredible though. Like, I love that speculative thinking as well. Is how would this work? I'm a hyper speculative thinker, so I'm like, I want to write every little detail. And my editor's like, you need to take all this out because first your book's too long, and second, like nobody cares. I'm like, what? We need to know the how and the why. This like the logistics of this matter to me. And so your book, like that I love it so much, having the adaptation of the dinosaurs in there, because that is a huge what if thing. Like, if dinosaurs live with us, how are they driving? How are they talking? How are they adapting to everyday things? And yeah, like from his grabber arms to his car, it makes sense.
That part. One thing that helped me rate that part is like I would just go around and have my arms like this, and like, okay, how am I going to reach that? What do I need? And how is that going to work? So like, just like putting myself into their shoes.
I love that. And it's a very relatable thing for, so many of us do live with limitations, those with physical limitations. And there's many times that other folks that don't live with limitations, they're just like, just do it. You can just do it. Like, you take for granted things like walking, things like reaching, grabbing, standing, even going to the bathroom, being able to eat solid food. Those things are so basic to the human experience. And yet so many struggle and have to adapt around that. And their reality is, well, I've never known that. Somebody who's born blind, they don't know how to see. Somebody who's born deaf, they don't know how to hear. And yet, like, they get around in these magnificent ways, still functioning in society. And it's a beautiful thing to look at. Let's talk a little more about your creature design, your dinosaur technology, because you do have your grabber arms, you do have your cars. What else went into designing all of the creatures, especially Dino? She is a unique specimen.
She is. Again, she has been cooking in my head for a really long time. So I wanted her to have like a really unique look. Decided to put that passage about meeting the vicious winged mammal and what she looked like in the Who Wrote It series. I wanted her to kind of look formidable, but also, she's a mutant mammal. And there's also these differences, from Kara. Like, she has this long arms, she has this fur. She walks on all fours, but she can walk on two legs if she wanted to. She's most comfortable on all fours. And that's just something that was just cooking in my head for a really long time.
And how about her glowing tail?
The glowing tail, I just wanted to like have a creature that's really cool. And have that glowing red tail. Like, who has a glowing red tail? That was also been cooking, is like having the concept of bioluminescence in there, but also like Dinosaur's tail has a little bit of a functional piece. Like, it has a lot of her body warmth there. So if you see like in the wintry scenes where she has certain adaptations for winter, like her fur gets thicker and her tail is warmer, but the drawback is it takes away all of her energy. So I'm all corporate that had it make sense.
Yeah, and it does make sense. I really appreciated you throwing in the seasons in there. Like, that was so legit. I feel like too often in especially fantasy books, like elves and stuff, they're like, where's the seasons? Everybody just goes on an adventure, and you're like, okay, so what about rain and earthquakes and fires and snow and winter and deadness and no food scarcity? That is a real thing. That's a real thing you captured, was food scarcity. You have so much attention to detail. I absolutely love it. So it is a fantastic book. Let's go ahead and do a quick little rapid fire question section just to know a little bit more about you. So, what is your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur? Ooh, I love the raptor dinosaurs. Those are my favorites.
What was the hardest scene for you to write?
The most challenging part was the winter. I wanted to capture like all the hard times, but also like, have you ever like had a book where it was just like, have this in your head, but you have a hard time putting it on paper? That was what was going on.
How much does the story change from your notebook to when it's on computer?
Sometimes it's slightly, and sometimes it's like dramatic. Like when I'm writing Caged Fire, which is a sequel right now, and there's actually going to be 3 POVs.
Oh,
yes. So if you sign up to my newsletter, you on some months you get passages of it. And my last one was it April. I talked about adding a Giganotosaurus police officer, his POV. So in this dystopian Cornelia city, he's struggling to keep the peace, but he's also connected to the original escape.
No, that's going to be interesting.
Yes, those things have just been so much fun to write. He's quite the fun character, and like the dystopia of it. Cage Fire is really fun. Some of the stuff in Glowing Red is going to appear in Cage Fire, so get out your highlighters.
I love books that do require something of their readers to pay attention, to go back. So this is definitely my kind of series. Love it. So would you say that you're a plotter, or are you a pantser kind of writer? You just
do it, get my pen and paper, write the scenes, like the scene I want to write, which POV I want to write. And I'm just like, all right, how am I going to
have a favorite character or least favorite character?
I think like Carter and Dice are like about the same. And then maybe I think I have a least favorite character. It's like, is kind of like saying like which one of your children is your favorite? Because they're all like a part of me.
And there are a couple characters in my books that I'm like, I hate you so much and I just want you to die, and they don't and they won't. But yeah, there's still a love for them because they came from you. I get that. What is one paleontology fact that absolutely blows your mind?
Here's a fact that that really we thought it was really cool. I was reading The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. Actually, I have it right here by Steve Brissot. Really good read, by the way. And it talked about how sauropods, or your long-necked dinosaurs, they talk about their respiratory systems. The biggest dinosaurs on Earth had the same respiratory systems as birds.
Really?
Yes, and that contributed to how they were able to get so big, because they had a more efficient, way of breathing than a mammal. Where the mammal, we just go, but the birds, they have air sacs. So in these air sacs, you can just basically breathe continuously, and there's continuous gas exchange. Whereas, in mammals, we breathe in, there's gas exchange, and then we breathe out.
I don't know anything about the bird's respiratory system. This is so fascinating to me. I love it. Yeah. I mean, I've touched cats, not birds.
So that kind of blew my mind just a little bit.
There are so many fascinating things to learn just between biology and then like body systems, animal anatomy and physiology and all that. Like, if I could go back in my life, I probably would have gone into different fields to learn more about that sort of thing, because it is fascinating. But that's what documentaries are for, and books. And it's great books like the one that you just showed in your book. Yes. Well, just in parting, what is some of your best advice that you would give to aspiring authors?
Just do it. If you have an idea that you really, really love and you really want to expand on, do it. Push through the self-doubt that you may have. I had a lot of it when I was first writing Glowing Red. I had a lot of moments where I was like, should I do it? No one's going to like it. People are going to yada, yada, yada. Luckily, I was surrounded by people that were like, no, you got to write this down. You got to keep going. And my husband, so wonderful. He was like, on the moments I was like, I was going to quit, he was like, no, get back to writing. Write this book. So just do it and push through that self-doubt and work hard and write as many drafts as you need. Get that editor. Invest in a book cover designer. You got a dream. You got a vision. You got this idea that's so unique, and that's something that you love, that you want to put out into the world. Just do it.
Absolutely. I love that. It's your passion matters. And if it is something that is exciting to you, there is guaranteed to be other people out there who are excited about it. It might take a little bit to find them, but often what I've found is it's not the case. When people see these unique things like this book, they want it. You don't know what you're missing in your life until you see that product in front of you. So yes, write your book. Somebody's going to see it and they'll be like, that is what I've been looking for. Yes. And it's going to change their life. So I love that advice.
One day, I see these posts on Instagram where it's like, if she writes it, then I'm going to buy it. And like, one day I hope to be one of those authors. Like, if she buys it, if she writes it, I want to buy it. I'm going to be somebody's favorite author.
Absolutely. And it's going to be awesome. I mean, yes. I'm going to buy your books. I'll do a post for that someday for you.
Yay!
All right. Well, that is about our time today. So thank you so much, Aleksey, for joining me. It's just been an absolute pleasure. All of your details are going to be down in the description. Your book, your website's going to be down there. I'd encourage everybody to sign up for Aleksey's newsletter. They are really, really fun and very, very unique. This isn't just like a boring email buy your book. This has like fun facts in it, passages in it, and it's very dinosaur based. So check it out. And also your book link will be down there, your Instagram, so that everybody can follow you. And for all the viewers out there, thank you again for subscribing to the podcast, listening to the podcast. If you want to subscribe, please do, and hit like so we can keep supporting indie authors. And we'll see you next week.